After hearing what Shiro had told her about her sister, Arnia collapsed on the ground and sat with an empty look in her eyes. So Big Sis is frozen right now, and the moment you unfreeze her, she'll be corrupted and lose her mind? Arnia asked as Shiro nodded. Closing her eyes, Arnia bit her lip. How is that any different from death? She asked as her voice quivered slightly. If it was death, it would be easier for me to save her. Shiro sighed. With death, it's just a matter of me grabbing her soul and giving it a new body. However, what's happening to her right now is so much worse. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's a way for me to save her, but I can't do it just yet due to my limited power. Hearing this, Arnia opened her eyes in surprise and looked at Shiro. Really? Arnia asked as Shiro nodded her head. To be honest, if Shiro wanted to, she could do it now. However, it required her to lift the seal off her divinity, and once that's done, there was no turning back. How long will it take? Arnia asked as Shiro thought about it for a moment. It'll take quite a while. I can't put a number on it since I'm unsure of it myself, but it will happen. That I can promise you. Shiro said as Arnia nodded her head. All right, is it possible for me to see my big sister right now? Without saying anything else, Shiro waved her hand and opened a portal. Within the portal was an icy tundra, and in the center was a single block of ice. Encased in the ice, Niphim stood with a small smile on her face. Seeing her sister for the first time after so long, Arnia dashed into the portal while Shiro, Iris, and Nine waited by the entrance. Running up to the statue, Arnia placed her hand on the surface and stood silently. Closing her eyes, she pressed her head against the ice and muttered to herself for a moment before closing her mouth. Waiting by the portal for around a minute, Shiro watched as Arnia stepped out. Raising an eyebrow, Shiro could see a new light in her eyes. Since you hold the key to my sister's survival, I'll do anything for you to help her. My powers are limited. I'm not as determined or combat-ready as the me that the Raven created, but I will try my best. My sister has already done everything in her power to get revenge and free me, so I can't hide behind her anymore. It's my time to help her, and I hope you can give me that chance. There are no free meals in this world, so whatever you require from me, I will do it. Arnia said as Shiro chuckled. You know, if you said that to anyone else, they might have strange ideas about you. But I'm not that mean. I don't need much from you except to sign a contract to give up your chance at the new age and become my ally. That way I wouldn't need to kill you. You don't even have to fight or do anything. You can wait while I free your sister, then the two of you can live together. Though seeing the fire in your eyes, something tells me that you won't let yourself do nothing while the word chances. So I have one request for you. Be my bodyguard for now and use this chance to temper yourself. Make yourself strong enough so that you can stand against the gods just in case a second Raven appears and try to destroy your family again. Shiro smiled as Arnia nodded her head. While I may be a simple breeze to the gods right now, I will transform into a hurricane in due time and sweep away those that will threaten my sister. She has protected me long enough. Arnia kneeled down as Shiro prepared the contract ritual. Going through the process of the contract, Shiro accepted Arnia as an ally and stretched her body. Let's see. It's still around midday, so you three can probably go hunt a few monsters that are around the place. Don't go for anything too ambitious since Arnia needs to get used to her power. I'd say it'll take her around a week or so to sync up to her real strength. Though we'll need to take a break in 2 days since quite a few gods will be descending. When that happens, it'll be similar to the start of the new age all over again, but much, much worse. So prepare yourself for that day. As for me, I got something to deal with, so I'll be experimenting a little. Shiro shrugged as Iris nodded her head. In that case, then we'll rest for today as well. I'll do some final checks on Arnia's body to make sure that there are no lingering side effects. With the plans laid out, they made their way back to the castle as Shiro closed the door to her room. Slamming her hand down, she pulled out a lantern and let out a soul. Looking at the young man in front of her that no longer resembled that of a monstrosity, Shiro was rather surprised since it was quite the change. Young man, did you ever get laid in your life? If you didn't, then it's quite a waste for the young ladies in your world. Shiro joked as he clicked his tongue. I was too busy absorbing the corruption to bother with the pleasures of flesh. But enough about that. Let's proceed with what we agreed upon. Well, aren't you eager? Though I suppose you do prefer to be in a sword than a lantern. Who knows? When you cultivate a body, you might be able to exercise the sword between your legs. Shiro grinned before flicking her wrist and summoned Sylvanes. Usually I would prefer to do this with Helion by my side or Error, but with my memories as anima, it should be relatively easy to combine a soul with a sword. The only concern I have is the power of your soul and the grade of this sword. There's a chance that you could just get obliterated by the fragment of sentience within this sword, but it'll be fine, Shiro said, as the ancient terror froze up for a moment. The F***CK did you just say? He asked, but Shiro gave him no response except for a smile. Boom. Igniting several magic circles around her, a ritualistic pattern emerged from her feet and covered the entire floor of the room, basking it in a purple glow while chains shot out and grabbed onto Ancient Terror's body. The hell? He shouted out in a panic, realizing that he couldn't move. Apparently, it usually hurts less if you surprise them. Also, if you want to back out now, tell me, and I'll stop. Shiro smiled, staying silent for a bit. He stared at her and sighed. TSK, keep going. Good, because if you said no, I wouldn't have been able to stop anyways. Shiro shrugged. Pound percent carat. Clasping her hands together, the chains transformed into blades that shredded his soul into pieces. The fragments morphed into wisps of energy that wrapped around the blade of Sylvanes, causing the sword to hum with an annoyed ring. A silver glow erupted from the sword in an attempt to cast away the fragmented souls, but the glow was suppressed by the ritual. Let me just take this away. Shiro chuckled as she reached out with her hand and ripped a source of the silver energy from the blade. Tearing out the slither of sentience, Shiro opened her mouth and threw it in before licking her lips. A little spicy, I suppose. Sharp sting, but quite tasty. With the fragment of the sentience now out of the sword, the ancient terror was allowed to enter. His entry immediately dyed the sword black, as he was not completely free of the corruption yet, but Shiro didn't mind. After all, she was the source of all destruction. A little bit of corruption doesn't bother her. The main thing that she needed to remember was to retain the main properties of her blade while enhancing it with what the ancient terror could provide. Searching through her memories, Shiro smiled after finding what she wanted. Gathering energy into her fingers, she carved out black and red runes onto the blade and inserted some of her energy. While it may not be as potent as her divine energy, it was still enough to ignite the runes. She could finish it off in the future, but for now, she'll allow the sword to finish its transformation. Rumble. Feeling the ground shake, Shiro could hear the sound of notifications ringing in her ear, but ignored it for now, since she was focused on the sword. Now, stopping the ritual, she activated her soul maiden form and sealed the soul within the sword, finishing the fusion. A burst of energy erupted out from the blade as she quickly activated a barrier to prevent herself from being thrown out the room. Within the explosion of energy, she could see the blade hovering in the air, and the final notification told her everything she needed to know. Congratulations, you have discovered a new grade of equipment. Looking at the sword hovering in the middle of the ritual, Shiro could see that its shape had completely changed. Its guard was now replaced by a black and red crystal that seemed to creep up the blade and pulsed in sync with a heartbeat. The blade itself was completely black with red runes and circular holes in the center that are filled with the incomplete upgrades, and Helion tried to infuse onto this blade. All of her runes that she carved to help her with time magic were also within these holes, but the green glow had been replaced by red. Rather than a sword with a double-sided edge, it was more akin to a katana now, as the blunt side was corrupted by the crystals. Iriel, Soul Eater Blade of the Destroyer, Chaos. Upgrade in progress, 45%. A blade formed from the masterpiece of Hephaestus, an indestructible sword and an immortal soul of an ancient being. Tempered by the primal forces of destruction, this blade now possesses the power to render all to null. Wielded by the firstborn of destruction, this is the only blade in the world that can handle her power. Passive skills. This blade cannot be destroyed. This blade has no level. This blade ignores all forms of armor. This blade inflicts 5% of all damage as destruction damage. Cannot be healed through any meals unless you have a divinity rivaling that of the firstborn of destruction. While wielding this blade, you have a 20% resistance to all divinities except those that rival the firstborn of destruction. In your presence, your enemies will have their divinity suppressed by half a rank. Rank 2 God dash, rank 1.5 demigod. Unsheathing this blade causes primal fear. Anyone below God rank will cower in your presence. Demigods will have their movement restricted. Increased damage resistance by 2% for every enemy you face. Max, 80%. You can cut down all forms of magic and divine spells, converting the energy used for yourself in order to replenish mana or divine energy. This sword can be used as a catalyst for all spells and increases the chances of success by 50%. When infused with the power of, you are able to strike towards their source code. Active skill, Iriel. Effect 1. When activated, your stats are tripled as Iriel will now convert those that you kill as thralls for your command along with 100% true damage that cannot be mitigated. Duration, 2 minutes. Thrall duration, 10 minutes, or until thralls die. Cooldown 1 day. Effect 2. The enemy is locked in the same realm as you, and they cannot escape by any means. No one can interfere, even Firstborn, as you will be locked in a one-on-one duel. You will siphon 20% of their stats during the duel. Duration, 5 minutes. Cooldown, 1 week. Effect 3. You can distort reality with each strike. Should they attempt to guard, the sword will phase through as though they never blocked in the first place. Effect 3.5. You can shift your sword through space, and it will jump forward in an instant. If there is a wall, the sword will phase through the wall as though it was never there. Cost: 2% divine energy for each strike. Cost 2% mana for each shift. Cooldown: not applicable. Effect 4. You can infuse any element or divinity with this blade, and the effectiveness will be boosted by 300% and ignores all resistance towards the element or divinity. Cannot boost divinity on the level of Firstborn. Cost: 10% of divine energy, divinity. Cost 10% of mana, element. Duration: 10 minutes. Cooldown: 1 hour. Effect 5 to 300% life steal and 20% stat siphon. You heal back triple for every point of damage you deal, and each strike siphons their stats for a max of 20%. Can stack with effect 2 for 40% stat siphon. Cost: 90% of current health. Duration: 10 minutes. Cooldown: 1 hour. Effect 6. You cannot die. Your health will be locked at 1, and you enter a berserk state. Your stats are tripled. Cannot be stacked with other berserk skills. If berserk skills are active when this activates, they will be cancelled, and all of the backlash will happen at once. Duration: 5 minutes. Cooldown: 2 months. Backlash: immediately lose consciousness as the effect ends. You will be locked in a crystal for your body to repair itself. This lasts for 1 month. After 1 month, your stats will be locked at level 1 for the rest of the cooldown. Effect 7. This sword is bound to your code and can be summoned/resummoned at will. Codebound, Shiro. If you are to die and reincarnate without your memories, this sword can still be summoned, but is synced to your level until you regain your strength. Looking at all the upgrades to this sword, Shiro was speechless. All of the effects have been upgraded massively, and if she was to fight Rokarn again, he would probably die within 5 minutes. Massaging her eyes, Shiro didn't even want to bother about the other notifications as she knows it's probably announcements to the world. How are you feeling? Shiro asked as Iriel floated there for a moment without saying anything. Furrowing her brows for a moment, Shiro was about to ask again when she heard him speak. Why is my gender listed as sword? Iriel asked as Shiro paused in surprise. If you are going to F***CK someone in this form, then I'd be rather concerned, Shiro said, pointing at the blade, causing Iriel to sigh heavily. Tisk. While setting aside the problem of my penis, I need to rest for a bit since it's still a bit difficult. Nodding her head, Shiro waved her hand as Iriel transformed into a bracelet that wrapped around her right wrist. Looking at the bracelet, she noticed that it was rather thin with a pulsing crystal in the middle. Similar to the sword, it was black in color. With Iriel now on her wrist, Shiro sat down and closed her eyes. Leaning back, she dove into her mana realm and looked at the ball of light floating in the corner all alone. Sorry, Sylvanes. I had to borrow your sword body for Iriel, but I got something better for you, Shiro called out, but the ball only glanced back before continuing its sulk in the corner. Smiling helplessly, Shiro walked up behind it and sat down in the air. You see, this is only something I can do for you, but not Iriel since he needs a physical body. If you think about it, what I'm doing for you is slightly better than what I'm doing for him, Shiro said as she snapped her finger, plunging her hand into her chest. She started to pull out a dark blade that seemed to be made up of black mist. This is my soul sword. It's an old skill that I recreated just now since my control over swords have increased. If you sync to this one, it should be slightly better than your old body. Plus, if you think about it, the soul sword is better than a physical sword since I'm the strongest. By extension, you'll also be the strongest. Even stronger than Iriel. Shiro winked as Sylvanes thought about it for a moment before turning around and jumped on her shoulder. Little by little, the ball of light started to fade as it transformed into white mist that started to fuse with the sword. Watching this, Shiro smiled. The soul sword in her hand wasn't a proper soul sword, but rather one that's created from a shard of her that hasn't been touched by destruction. If it was her proper soul sword, Sylvanie's would be reduced to nothing. Iriel is a sword that's been touched by pure destruction, while Sylvanie's is going to fuse with a shard of me that's cultivating the divinity of creation. The end product should be two swords that represent both primal destruction and primal creation. Shiro thought to herself as she wasn't satisfied with just one chaos-grade weapon. She wanted two. Plus, not all weapons needed a physical form. When she was Anima, she had seen plenty of weapons that were more spiritual than physical, since physical weapons can break during combat. Unlike Iriel, who is indestructible, Sylvanie's is more suited to be a spiritual weapon if I'm going to infuse her with the divinity of creation, since I'm using source codes as a bridge for me to become something akin to the firstborn of creation. Shiro thought to herself as she opened her eyes once more. With Iriel on her wrist and Sylvanie's slowly fusing with the soul sword, Shiro decided to relax for now and make some adequate preparations for the second half of the new age. It was about time to go back as well, since she succeeded in finding a way to obtain a creation divinity through error. Waking up in the morning, Shiro gathered everyone in preparation to return to Asharia. So you're telling me that we'll be going to a giant floating city the size of a country with multiple races, including demons living in harmony? 9 asked in disbelief as Shiro nodded her head. Yep, it's my own personal domain. Something that all queens have, but this was made before I reset my level. Shiro smiled as 9 nodded his head. Well, it's obviously going to sound a little crazy, but everything will be proven soon. I didn't want to go to the north, but I'll be able to monitor the situation from Asharia anyways. I have quite a few researchers stationed in the north. Shiro shrugged while making her way out of the castle. Let's see. Everyone's here, so we can just teleport to the main plaza. 9. You'll get training from someone called Misu. Iris, I also want you to join someone named Sylvia for a while. She's also a healer that will help you improve massively. Plus, I think there's also something she can learn from you. Arnia, you can get some training from someone I know. She's called Sheena, and she's a control mage, so you'll be able to focus on improving your power. As for Aoi, you can go with someone called Aram. She's a researcher, and she'll be able to help you out. I'll come occasionally to run some tests, but otherwise you'll act as her assistant for now, Shiro said as they all nodded. Seeing that there was no problems, Shiro pulled out an orb and activated it. In front of her, a giant portal opened up as everyone could see a peak of a giant city with tall buildings through the windows of the teleport hall. Stepping through the portal, Shiro pulled out her phone and sent a message for Samuel, one of the spirit elders that now works as someone that organizes the new resident for her. Welcome back, Your Highness. Did you enjoy your journey? A void rang out as Samuel had immediately activated a teleport orb to send him to the main hall. Yes, I did. It was rather insightful. But guess what? I have a new job for you. I want you to show these new residents around as they work for Aoi, another queen that I've welcomed to our alliance. I'll get Nantian to prepare a living space for them later. Shiro grinned as Samuel glanced past Shiro and shuddered. Looking at the mass of people that he needed to show around, Samuel massaged his eyes and sighed. Very well, Your Highness. I shall make sure it is done. Samuel nodded. Perfect. I'll give you a holiday soon, don't worry. Shiro chuckled. However, Samuel was a little doubtful since there was a warning in his mind, telling him not to trust. This instinct was rather spot on, as the second half of the new age was literally around the corner. Once it arrives, there'll be a lot of work for him before his long-awaited holiday. But this was something he didn't know, so he could only ignore his suspicions for now. Watching Samuel leave with the residents that lived with Aoi, Shiro gave them a small wave. Welp, come along. I'll show you to your new mentors, I suppose. Shiro smiled as she snapped her fingers. Now that she's back in Asharia, she's gained access to more of her powers before her reset, which includes teleporting to anywhere she wanted within the city. That's because she's not using her power of nanobots, but rather using mana to access the nodes she's placed around the city. It's akin to paying the bus for a ride when you don't have a care, a quick transaction. Arriving at Aram's Mage Tower, Shiro glanced up and whistled. Compared to what it was before, the Mage Tower is now floating within a rift in space. It is both connected yet detached from Asharia, and there seemed to be a mirror-like surface that reflected the entire tower, connecting the two at the base. Rather than a tower, it's more akin to a floating pillar with parts sticking out. Well, this is certainly not what I expected, Shiro muttered. Currently, there was a camouflage around everyone so none of the residents of Asharia could see them. Watching the mages conjure a mirror staircase, Shiro found it a little boring. Follow me. We're going to take an expressway. Shiro smiled as she closed one of her eyes and targeted the top of the tower. Creating a needle with her mana, she fired it to the top and marked everyone with a rune. Snapping her finger, they suddenly traded places with the needle, and the 5 of them were now speeding towards Aram's window. Before they could smash the window, it opened with a slam and welcomed them in. Honestly, the moment I sensed your needle targeting my window, I realized that you were probably going to catapult yourself. Seems like your little week-long journey didn't change much of you. Aram sighed as she looked at her new guests. Sticking out her tongue, Shiro hopped up and dusted herself. Looking at Aram, who had messy hair, an unbuttoned mage robe, a sports bra, long skirt paired with stockings and some boots, Shiro was surprised at her outfit since she usually kept herself well dressed. Sticking out of her mouth was a white stick that was similar to a cigarette, but Shiro could tell that it's created from pure mana. If you're wondering about this, then don't worry. It's something I managed to create. It's a stick of pure mana that stimulates you awake. It works better than coffee and has 0 adverse effects. I've been awake since you've left. I do prefer to have a nap now and again, though. Aram waved her hand as she conjured more mana sticks and offered one for Shiro. Grabbing one, Shiro placed it in her mouth and was surprised by the constant stream of mana entering her body and warming her up. Oh my, well, isn't this rather handy? It tastes sweet too, Shiro remarked while activating analysis and scanned the composition of the mana stick. Once she got a full scan, she decided to make one herself. However, hers was a little bigger compared to the small ones that Aram created. It was twice as wide and 3 times as tall as Shiro. The giant white stick of mana was now firmly planted in Aram's office. I was about to warn you, since with your mana, even if you compress it, it'll probably be King massive. If anyone was to try use this as a shot of energy, they can probably forget about sleeping for the next millennia. Aram sighed as she grabbed her stick, snapped it into several pieces, and started to chew it like candy. So, what brings you to my lab? I'm rather busy, and as you can see with the changes to my tower, the research was rather fruitful. Aram smiled. All right, business. Shiro nodded absent-mindedly while staring at the pillar of mana. Say, before we talk about business, is the mana stick supposed to act as a high-power Viagra? Shiro asked as she was scanning the composition of the pillar. Pardon, raising an eyebrow. Aram was confused about Shiro's question when she decided to scrape off a piece of the pillar. Snapping her finger, magic circles started to appear around her as she scanned the piece. At the same time, they both saw the root cause. Hidden within the tiny strands of mana was a foreign influence in the form of Aphrodite's crest. Don't ask. I didn't use her blessing, Shiro said, massaging her eyes. Trying to dismiss the pillar of pure concentrated aphrodisiac, Shiro discovered that she could not. I'll repurpose this as medicine, I suppose. It might help those with difficulties in the bedroom, Aram said with an awkward expression, as they probably shouldn't smell the fumes from this pillar. Waving her hand, she teleported it to a spare storage room that she had set up for now and asked Sylvia's help in this later. Anyways, setting aside whatever the hell that was, would you mind helping out with Always' condition? You see, she was unfortunately a bit too close to one of my fights, and it reduced her body to this state, Shiro said as she disinfected her hand. Meanwhile, in the realm of gods, Aphrodite pouted in front of her panel that showed Shiro and Aram sealing away her gift. TSK, what a waste. I had just found good inspiration after seeing the mana stick too, Aphrodite complained as she waved her finger and created the mana stick, but used her blessing in the creation. Holding the pink stick of mana, Aphrodite smelled the fragrance and licked her lips. Athena should like this. She grinned as she immediately left her room in order to look for Athena. As for what she created, celestial aphrodisiac, ambrosia, a concentrated mass of mana in which the goddess of lust had placed her blessing on during the creation. Due to its creation method and the use of divine energy, it has ascended to the rank of ambrosia, the pinnacle for consumables. Even gods will have a hard time repressing this. If they do manage to repress the heat, their resistance will be lowered, making it easier for charm to take effect. Lay her down on the table. I'll run a quick scan of her, Aram said as Shiro glanced at Aoi, who nodded her head and laid down on the table in front of them. I'll need your friend with the katanas to step out for a bit, since I need Aoi to strip. Hearing this, Aoi coughed violently as she looked at Aram in surprise. What? I can't see through your clothes like Shiro does. If I want to examine your body properly, I'll need you to strip down, Aram said with a bored wave of her hand. Biting her lip, Aoi nodded her head as she waited for Nine to leave the room. Once he left, Aoi started to take her clothes off as Aram stared intently at her. Suppressing the embarrassment, Aoi stayed silent and waited for Aram's response. This is rather difficult. With how things are, I suppose you want me to help her get a proper body. You know that's not my speciality, Aram said as Shiro nodded her head. I do know that. However, I believe that this is a good chance for you, hence why I brought her here. I've already made some discoveries using my own powers, but it'll take a while for me to fully cure her, I suppose. During that time, you can see if you can get some insights on magic. Shiro smiled while handing Aram a memory stick with all the documents inside. Her goal for handing Aoi over to Aram is so that Aram could learn about the source code or something close to that. That way, it provides her with a way to fight demigods or gods should the need ever arise. All right, I'll look into it along with my current research, though the progress might be a little slow. Aram shrugged as she created another mana stick and placed it in her mouth. Gotcha. I'll come visit here and there to help out occasionally, though I am rather curious as to what kind of research you've been up to. Mind doing a small showcase? Shiro asked as Aram thought about it for a moment before nodding her head. Sure. Aoi, get dressed before I call your friend and then I'll show you all a small demonstration, I suppose, Aram said as she sat down and waited patiently. After a short wait, everyone was now gathered in her office. Right then, I suppose I should explain the purpose of my research first. So Shiro, you know that I'm a mage specialized in control and manipulation of space. With the knowledge of other gardens and so on, it got me thinking about breaching the barriers around space and finding an alternate reality, I suppose. It's so that we could potentially obtain knowledge or items that we might have missed out on. Let's say if you are in a temple and you can only choose left path or right path and you chose right. The alternate reality would have you choosing left. I'm breaching the barrier to try find a somewhat perfect copy of our reality, but with slight differences, I suppose. That way, the chances of bringing something over would be more successful in a way. Think of it like a mirror. I need to find a reality that's equal distance from the center as our world to increase the compatibility. Aram explained while projecting a hologram in the center of the room. Using a mirror in the center, she used a model of the Earth and reflected it on the mirror's surface. Grabbing the reflection, she dragged it over to their Earth and overlapped the two. My tower is in a similar state where the reflection is being projected to our world. Though it's not a bridge between worlds. Right now it's more akin to me saving what my tower would be in a separate world and loading that save into ours. What we do to this tower does not change anything in the other world, though I'm working on a proper bridge, Aram said as the hologram disappeared. Hearing all of this, Shiro became silent as this sent a lot of ideas into her mind, things that could potentially change everything. There was two possibilities with Aram's discovery. It's either a perfect reflection where their choices are inversed, or the side of creation, Shiro muttered with her eyes narrowed. If things were exactly as her diagram had shown, then the reflection that was equally spaced from the center would be a garden that's the extreme of creation. As the firstborn of destruction, her garden should never come close to the garden belonging to the firstborn of creation. But that's only in the normal situation. If Aram is able to bridge this gap, then she'll be able to meet the firstborn of creation. Pardon. Aram raised an eyebrow as Shiro shook her head. Nothing. Just me wondering to myself. If your research is successful, then it may mean more than you think. Are there any information from the books of the Inverse Tower that spoke of their pantheon of gods, or information about their world? Shiro asked curiously, but Aram shook her head. This tower is essentially a reflection of mine. I would never keep a book on the world, but rather document upon documents of research. While I research space and gravity, my inverse seems to be researching time. I see. No matter. I'll keep an ear out for any progressions of your research. Though for now, I'll leave Aoi in your care. Shiro smiled as Aram nodded her head. Talking for a little longer, Aram watched as Shiro left with Iris and Nine. Glancing over at Aoi, Aram thought for a moment before pulling out 2 rubber gloves from her inventory. Right then, since Shiro has asked me to look into your body state, I can take a look while I have my break, Aram said as Aoi felt a shiver. It was similar to the time when Shiro had decided to do a checkup on her, but this time the feeling was stronger. Wearing the gloves, Aram tugged on it lightly before letting go, causing it to let out a snapping sound. Noticing something in the corner of Aram's room, Aoi shivered. I don't worry about that. Some of my old customers seem to have reached out to me and ordered a few toys, though it's only a side job now, so you don't need to worry about it. It's not for your use. Aram chuckled as Aoi swallowed her saliva. Can I ask what your old job is? Sex toy store owner. Now then, I'll have to ask you to strip again. Aram smiled. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. Leaving Aram's tower, Shiro immediately felt Aoi's aura flutter in nervousness. Seems like Aoi is a little nervous with Aram, though she'll get used to it soon, I suppose. Shiro muttered before looking back at Nine and Iris. Let's see. Next is Nine. I'll take you to my friend's detective agency now. You should be able to get some decent training from her that'll help you with gathering information, Shiro said as she locked onto the node that should be in front of Misu's detective agency. Teleporting in front of the store, Shiro was surprised to see a towering building that loomed over the street. Glancing up, she could now see a giant neon sign that was all too familiar to her. Mrs. Fantasy 100% Guaranteed Detective Agency. Shiro approved. Rated 5 stars. Wow. Voted Best Detective Agency in the world. New customers get 1 B-class investigation for free. Immediately feeling the life drain from her body, Shiro massaged her eyes and sent out her senses to see if she could locate Misu. Locking onto her signature, Shiro was rendered speechless one more. In her office, Misu was skipping around with a dumb smile on her face. Around her were piles upon piles of documents that seemed to contain information about the investigations. Reading her lips, Shiro could tell what she was saying. Huey, more investigations. I even got an A-class request today. Fufufu, maybe I should treat myself to Yin's cooking. Wait a minute. Pausing in her dance, Misu realized that Shiro was standing outside of her store. Before Shiro could do anything, the main doors to the building opened as 2 figures walked out. Both were skeleton that wore suits. Your Highness, our boss has ordered us to welcome you in. The skeletons bowed as Shiro sighed and nodded her head. Walking in, she could see that the building had undergone giant renovations. It's similar to the Adventurers Guild with all the functions, only that the staff had been replaced with skeletons. As for Misu's right-hand man, Essel, he was nowhere to be seen. Realizing that his aura was on the floor, just beneath Misu's office, Shiro could see that he was slamming his head into the table while the documents kept piling up with no end in sight. Poor guy, he can't keep up with Misu's hobby, Shiro muttered as the corner of her mouth twitched. Following the skeletons, Shiro made her way up the building with Nine and Iris following behind her. Arriving at Mrs. office, Shiro could see Misu sitting in a large office chair with her legs on the table. In her mouth was the stick of mana that Aram had made, and she had a large grin on her face. Welcome to my tower. Do you have any requests for the greatest detective there is? Misu grinned as she made a pose with her hand holding the mana stick like a cigarette. Technically, if we brute force things, I might be the better detective. You can ask the dead, but I can read more. Shiro smirked as Misu pouted in annoyance. Crushing the mana stick in her hands, she sat properly. Way to dampen my mood. Rude. Haha, sorry. But we both know I'll still need to rely on you for the best info. Shiro smiled as Mrs. smiled and nodded her head. Almo, very true. Now, I heard that you went to Aram's to drop off a friend of yours. Can I assume that you're here to do the same with one of these two? Misu asked. Either news travels fast or your scouts are just that talented. But yes, you are right. I am here to drop FF9 who I hope can be in your care for a while. Shiro smiled. Oh, the lad with the katanas? Sure, I don't see why not. But if you want someone to look after him, there are better people for this job. Since you came to me, you also want me to investigate something, don't you? Misu smirked as she narrowed her eyes at Shiro. Yep, I have an S-class assignment for you. Shiro grinned. Hearing this, Misu's eyes sparkled since Shiro had an understanding of the grades and wouldn't just attach an S rank 1 onto any mission. I want you to find all the information, and I mean all the information, on the group that experimented with Nine and Iris. Nine can provide you with some clues while he's under your care, and you can also give him some training. Any would do since he's a jack of all trade kind of vanguard. The key for now is to find out everything you can on this group. They're still out there, so I want to be able to track them down quickly. We won't kill them all yet, but rather monitor and see what's going on before we do anything, Shiro said as her eyes were cold. Seeing this, Misu knew that whoever did this is rather high on Shiro's kill list. Adding the document to her current pile of folders, she asked Shiro a few more questions before dragging Nine away to one of the training halls. Before we do the investigation, since I'm preparing staff for this job, I need you to show me what you're capable of, Misu said as she stretched her body and her playful aura disappeared. Shiro said that you're a jack of all trades. If an abnormality like her had described you using the same term as herself, then I'll need test you extensively. Hearing this, Nine FRZ up midway through setting up his formation. Pardon. Without saying anything, Misu's dress started to change as green flames erupted around her. From the flames, An army of undead started to appear. Phew, bursting out with energy. The flames reached the ceiling as the final soldier was something too big for the standard flames to summon. From within the emerald fire, a pair of hollowed eyes appeared, followed by a draconic head and body. A pair of mighty wings unfurled themselves and acted as a shield for the skeleton soldiers, mages, cavalry, and so on. There was a skeleton for every combat occupation. Missu LVL 900 Undead Queen. Let's test out how well you can handle these guys, Mrs. said as she cracked her knuckles. ####. Leaving Mrs. Agency, Shiro started to make her way towards the military section where the mech pilots were training. She had already reapplied her camouflage so the residents wouldn't be surprised to see her walking around with Iris. You mentioned that everything here was made by you, right? Iris asked as Shiro glanced back and nodded her head. Yep, why you ask? Nothing much. Just surprised at how much mana you would have needed to do this. Also, how many strong people do you have in this city? I've discovered several spikes of mana that's much bigger than normal. Some are in close proximity, so they've melded together, making it hard to see how many people are there. Iris said as Shiro nodded her head. You're probably sensing Madison and the others. I wonder if you can sense the primal demons. Shiro muttered, causing Iris to pause. The primal what now? I do apologize about my lack of welcome. I did not sense you until you allowed me to discover your aura, Your Highness. A voice rang out as a portal opened in front of them. Lucifer, Shiro greeted, whereas Iris felt her entire body freeze up. Lucifer LVL 1000, Ancient Lord of Pride, Divinity 2. How's Madison? Shiro asked as Lucifer kneeled down. Since they serve Madison and know that Shiro was stronger, he was going to show the same amount of respect for this woman as he would with Madison. Though if people were to ask him about his allegiance, he would say Madison. Her Highness has been progressing well and trying to understand more of her divinity. Progress is a little slow, but it'll speed up once the world has finished its transformation. Lucifer replied as Shiro nodded her head. Also, if you do not mind me asking, how come your friend wield the power of Odin? Well, I say wield, but it's more like has the power but can't use it. Lucifer asked while looking at Iris. So you sensed it too? It's something to do with her eyes, but I'm still in the progress of helping her out. You don't need to concern yourself too much. For now you can go back to what you were doing earlier. I'll look for the 7 of you later since I have something to ask of you. Shiro waved her hand as Lucifer nodded. Very well. I shall await your arrival with the rest of the ancient lords. Lucifer nodded as he disappeared with a swirl of flames. So as I was saying, my friend came from a demon lineage of a god, and she managed to clear a test that allowed her to have the 7 ancient demons as her subordinates. Asmodeus, Lucifer, Belphegor, Mammon, Beelzebub, Satan, and Leviathan. They're all a match for most gods, whereas Madison is a demigod. Shiro explained as Iris felt like her brain just exploded. It shouldn't be anything too crazy though. Shiro shrugged. What's more crazy than this? Iris thought to herself while Shiro led them towards the mech bay. Sensing the outline of the mechs, Iris was surprised that technology like this even existed. Following Shiro through the different sectors of the mech bay, they eventually arrived at where Sheena was training all of the specialized pilots. Dismissing her disguise, Shiro waved. Yo, it's been a while. Shiro grinned. Your Highness, welcome back. Sheena widened her eyes and quickly kneeled along with all the other pilots. Thank you. I got a task for you if you don't mind helping me out. Of course, what do you require of me? Sheena nodded. I want you to help me train Iris for a bit. As a support-orientated adventurer like her, she needs to be able to keep herself safe while a support mage is trying to kill her on the battlefield. I just need you to train her until she is proficient in keeping herself safe. Plus, you can also train yourself in trying to catch a support mage. They should usually be your first target during a fight. Shiro smiled as Sheena nodded. I'll come every so often to check up on your eyes and contact you when I've obtained enough information on the group that did this to you and 9. Shiro smiled as she turned to Iris. Amen, thank you. Iris bowed as Shiro nodded and left the area. Stretching her body, she yawned and wondered what else is everyone doing. Closing her eyes, Shiro could sense Kiona playing games next to Revel. Seems like she found out who kept obstructing her. Seeing her expression, she is probably angry while Revel is having the time of his life with a shit-eating grin. Shaking her head, Shiro made her way back to the main tower. As she was making her way up the tower, Shiro could sense that Sylvia was conducting a few experiments with the bed that she was laying in. Since it was fully tainted by her aura of corruption, Shiro could guess that Sylvia wanted to increase her understanding. Everyone seems so busy. Lysandra is nowhere to be seen right now, and the only other person in the tower is Nantion. Shiro muttered while jumping through the rift, phasing through the floors one by one. She could see all of her staff working diligently. With a smile on her face, she reached the main command and noticed that only one person was inside. It's probably him. Let me go surprise him. Shiro snicked as she activated a few skills to completely camouflage herself. Peeking through the doors, she realized that he was sleeping. In his hands was a mana stick that was half absorbed, and understood that he must have slept before he was able to wake himself properly. Shaking her head with a smile, she shrugged and quickly teleported to her room. Grabbing a blanket, Shiro placed it over Nantion before looking at the documents that he was working on. All of them were research notes on Lysandra's condition, along with some observations of Fallen that the scouts have seen out in the field. Reading through all of them, Shiro was shocked at how much research was here. Even when knowing Nantion's working speed, this must have been difficult to pull off. Smiling at his effort, Shiro pulled up a chair and turned on one of the computers. She was going to fill in some blanks within his documents, some answers that he didn't know and should help him make a leap in his understanding. Once that was done, she started to pull up some records uploaded by the researchers in the North Pole. Reading through the records, Shiro created a mana stick to keep herself focused and awake. Meanwhile, she doesn't know that the realm of gods was in turmoil. Upon receiving the notification that a new grade of weapon has been created, all of the gods were shocked to hear that it was given the grade of chaos. Those that had been awoken knew that they had to get their hands on this weapon. If a weapon was ranked chaos, the only thing higher than firstborn, then this weapon could very well be their only hope against the firstborn of destruction. They tried to recruit everyone that had a divinity that could pinpoint the target, but none of them could locate the owner. Are you sure you want to pull a trick like this? Helios asked with an raised eyebrow while Argus smirked and watched with his legs crossed. In front of them was a mirror that seemed to reflect everyone that was trying to locate Shiro. Of course, I do quite like what she's doing. It's interesting, and I'll be honest, peace is a bit boring. I'd rather watch them go on a treasure hunt than to find her instantly. I can't stop their eyes completely, but it'll take time for them to find her. Argus chuckled. We must hide her for now. While I am annoyed that she was the one who found a new grade before me, I also understand the pains of having something unique. Everyone will want to have it. I've experienced it. Many blacksmiths have experienced it before me, so just think of it as one craftsman looking out for another. Plus, my stupid successor is her party member, so it wouldn't hurt to help her. If only he could replicate even a portion of that chaos grade. Hephaestus sighed as he massaged his neck. Isn't your successor upgrading the sword? Who knows, he might even help her get another grade higher than chaos. Helios grinned as Hephaestus nodded his head in appreciation. True, when he does that, I can finally retire and give him my title of God of Blacksmithing. Honestly, once I retire, I won't have annoying jackasses asking for weapons or armor day in day out. Hephaestus laughed loudly as he just wanted to push the annoying stuff to Helion. Well, setting aside the problem of hiding Shiro from their eyes, what should we do with the new pantheons that have decided to reveal themselves? You know they won't stand still and allow us to claim the title of strongest pantheon anymore. They have gods that rival Nyx and the other four primals. Helios asked with a serious face. Stall for time. Argus replied with a small smile. We've already made the strongest ally in the world. The moment the other pantheons lay their claws on any of the 5 primals or gods that Shiro is friends with, you know ruin will descend upon their land. Their holy site will be desecrated and blood will rain down from the corpse of gods. Waving his finger, Argus replied while thinking of the fight between Rokarn and Shiro. Do you really think any of their gods can withstand this once she matures as a deity? Shaking his head, Helios looked down at his hand that was shaking ever so slightly. When he lent his power to Shiro, he barely caught a glimpse of what's underneath. That feeling of dread, corruption, and pure destruction almost caused him to attack her out of reflex. It was as though something within him just snapped the moment it came into contact with her. An instinct to attack the thing he feared. Shaking his head, Helios wondered what it was that he sensed. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. He sighed, but he knew the probability of that being the case is small. While Argus, Helios, and Hephaestus were overlooking the situation with other gods, Hades was sitting on his throne with a cold expression on his face. Even though they should be worried about the firstborn of destruction, the other pantheons still want to weaken our power. He muttered and annoyed. Beside him, a portal opened up as a familiar figure stepped out. Kaluz, you're back. Your daughter wondered where you went off to. Hades said as he glanced back to see Kalu's, Shiro's grandfather stepping out, while Citral, Kalu's wife, followed behind him. Well, since Mio was in your care, I presumed that she'll be rather safe. I had to take a small break since there's been an influx of corrupted souls trying to reach out to this world. Most of them tried to converge towards my granddaughter's position. Kalu said with a frown. Did you learn anything from them? Hades asked curiously. Unfortunately, no. Most of them seem to be incomplete slaves that belong to the other factions. They're sent out to track down the biggest source of corruption out in the world, but recently, they suddenly changed directions and stopped trying to reach my granddaughter. Kalu's reported as Hades nodded his head. It has probably something to do with Shiro resetting her class. No matter, we can find out a little later. Hades thought to himself before looking at the two. Go make your preparations and take some time off. The world should allow your entry soon, and you'll be able to see your granddaughter again. As for your daughter, she's training to upgrade her divinity from demigod to god state. Hades said as Kalu's nodded his head. Making another portal, he left with his wife. I really need some rest. Kalu said as he massaged his shoulders. Well, you can have a quick nap when you go back. Before that, have you forgotten what you promised me? Citral asked as Kalu's flinched before he nodded. Fine, I'll help that brat obtain divinity, if I can. Though it depends on if he's lucky enough or not. There is the chance that he may just stay low-leveled forever. Kalu said as Citral stared at him. I know. I never said I won't help. I doubt Mio will be happy with me if I refuse to help that brat. TSK, why do I have to help the brat that stole my daughter? Kalu complained. PFT, you saw how happy Mio was with him. Enough for her to give up some of her power just to leave the realm so that she could make a family with him. Do her this favor, okay? Citral smiled, nodding his head. Kalu made his way back to Nosvardi so that he could prepare the necessary materials to help out Koji when he arrives on Earth. In addition to this, he also had a little present for Shiro that he obtained while fighting the corrupted ones trying to reach her. As she was sorting out the files while adding her own knowledge, Shiro didn't realize that Nantion had woken up. The only reason she noticed was because he placed a cup of juice beside her. Ah, you're awake. Was I too loud? Shiro asked as she took a sip of the juice and smiled happily. Nah, I was planning on waking up to resume my research. When did you return? Nantion asked curiously as Shiro glanced at the time. Roughly 3 hours or so ago. Also, I've been filling some blanks that you had in your research. With this, it should be easier for you to come to a conclusion, Shiro said, handing over the documents while finishing the rest of her juice. Seeing Nantion put away the documents without checking it, Shiro raised an eyebrow. Are you not going to check it? Shiro asked curiously while Nantion nodded his head. I will, but not just yet. There's something that I need to show you before that. It's something I found, but I figured it's probably better for you to look at it first. Nantion smiled as he stood up and stretched his body. Can you at least tell me what it is first? It's a surprise, haha. You'll find out when you see it. It's something you saw before, so you'll be familiar. Nantion reassured with a chuckle. Hearing this, Shiro nodded her head. Then at least give me another cup. She grinned, holding out her hand for another cup of juice. PFT, you can ask for more than just a cup, you know? Nantion shrugged while pulling out another cup. The thing is, if I try to drink too much, it becomes a chore. If I drink too little, it is over too quickly. With a cup, I can drink as fast as I want while savoring the taste. There's just enough so that when I finish I'm satisfied, yet leaves me wanting for an extra cup. It doesn't get overwhelming like a giant tub of juice, nor is it underwhelming like just a few sips. A cup of juice is just perfect, Shiro explained with excitement in her eyes, chuckling at her enthusiasm. Nantion activated a camouflage around them before teleporting them towards the dungeon plaza. The dungeon plaza is where Shiro had transferred all of the dungeons that they managed to recover. The plaza is made up of several levels that is split depending on the level of the dungeon. Low-level dungeons are on the first floor, while the high-level ones are on the higher floors. Each floor has multiple rooms that is connected to a subspace with a dungeon tower within, and that is where they can enter the dungeon. Dungeons that haven't been cleared recently would have a weekly challenge attached to it, and the first person to complete the dungeon would be awarded with rewards that matched the dungeon's difficulty along with the items they used during the clear. This is to prevent the dungeon break from happening. It wasn't that it'll be difficult to contain, but rather it'll be more of a pain to clean up the aftermath. Therefore, a good choice would be to just make sure it doesn't happen in the first place. Following Nantion to the first floor that contains the low-level dungeons, Shiro could see a door that had been sealed off for the time being. Everyone seemed to ignore it as she realized that here was a ward placed on the door that would divert attention. Opening the door, Nantion gestured for Shiro to enter the subspace. Nodding her head, Shiro stepped through the door and was immediately greeted with the sight of a tower that was halfway through collapsing. There seemed to be another tower that was trying to merge itself with the current one as the two was changing places every so often. Is it because of Aram's experiment? Shiro asked as this was the first thing she thought of, but Nantion shook his head. Unlikely. I've already asked Aram, but she said that there are no reflection points, so it couldn't belong to another universe. This is just another dungeon that's trying to merge with this low-level one. But what's more interesting is what's inside rather than what's happening now. This was discovered during the third day that you were gone, and we immediately sealed it off. Thankfully, there has been no casualties, Nantion said as he started to make his way towards the entrance. Pushing it open with his hand, he walked in as Shiro followed behind without saying anything. She decided to save her questions for the end. Upon entering the dungeon, Shiro furrowed her brows and covered her nose. It stinks quite a bit, doesn't it? I will say that this dungeon is rather unique, I suppose. This stench can't be blocked by any gas mask that we create. We'll always smell this stench. Nantion glanced back as Shiro stared at the thing before them. Usually, one would have been given a dungeon task depending on the dungeon or several pathways that they could choose from where they kill mobs until the boss room. That was how it was for low-level dungeons. However, this one only had one room, and within the room was a giant corpse that was rotting in the middle of the swamp. Tomb of the Betrayer. There was no description, only the location name. The giant corpse seemed mostly humanoid with no changes. A standard skeleton with flesh still hanging on the bones. The swamp seemed to be its old flesh that's been melted into a liquid, submerging the body until only the head and shoulders could be seen. Those that are below a certain level will find themselves poisoned while inhaling this air, while those higher than level 500 would be immune. But that's not all. There are also a few assassin-type mobs that will attack, though you have that covered. Nantion smiled as Shiro waved her finger and revealed the mana strings she had laid out around them, piercing into the bodies of the assassins who seemed to be covered in a layer of the swamp flesh. Shiro had frozen them in place using ice magic. I want to get a close look at the swamp. This place appearing on Asharia can't be a coincidence. Plus, with how things are progressing, this probably has a link with my awakening. Shiro sighed as Nantion nodded his head. That's what I figured. Though there is a secondary barrier that we haven't been able to cross yet. You could probably do something about it, Nantion said as Shiro nodded her head. Walking towards the corpse, Shiro furrowed her brows as the stench increased to the point where she almost couldn't stand it. Noticing something stirring below her, Shiro glanced down and widened her eyes. A pool of darkness suddenly expanded and dragged her below while Nantion tried to grab her but failed. Wanting to teleport out, Shiro found herself completely bound. The mana within her couldn't gather to form a spell, as she could only struggle with her physical strength. Within the darkness, Shiro noticed a figure grab her by the face with its two hands. Concentrating her eyes on the figure, she realized that it was a muddied reflection of her. Feeling the power of destruction gather around her, Shiro felt like she heard a voice ring out beside her head. Don't try to become what you're not. It was her voice but cold. Shaking her head, Shiro spun her body around and tried to see who it was. However, the moment she turned around, she found herself sitting on a chair beside a lake. In front of her was a table, and around her was a small building in the center of this lake. There was no walls, only pillars that supported the roof, allowing her to view the scenery fully. Looking down, she realized that she was now wearing the same outfit she did as Anima. Just as she was about to mutter to herself, she noticed that she was unable to speak. Rather strange, she thought to herself as she stood up and left the small building. Looking at the garden and lake in front of her, she recognized it to be a replica of her old prison. Walking up to the lake, she looked in her reflection and saw a shadowy mass that had a similar form to her and realized that she was looking and controlling an avatar. Is this something related to the betrayer? She thought to herself. Sensing 5 powerful signatures approaching her location, Shiro furrowed her brows and stared at their direction. One by one, they appeared, 2 female and 3 male figures, but their appearance was blurred. They looked like ever-changing reflections of reality that didn't have a secure form. Strange, but I guess I'll have my answers soon. Are you sure this is the right place? Kronos asked with a frown as they were now approaching the edge of the universe where the system had placed a restriction, preventing them from going beyond. If they wanted to break this barrier, it would be no easy task. But that's only if they were going to do this forcefully. Yes, it is. We're not going to be going beyond the barrier. We're going to look for the void that's caught in the middle. Once we reach this rift, We should arrive at Shiro's old domain. Gaia nodded as she reached out with her hand and sliced down. Asterisk KRKK, cutting a tear in the void. All 5 of them walked through the rift and entered a strange world. The space in this place was unstable as it was in the middle of the known universe and a barrier. However, it miraculously held itself together. Flying through the rift, the gods could feel a chill down their spine as fear slowly crept into their hearts, but they managed to suppress it. In order to find Shiro's old domain, it requires a bit of luck. However, I've already made some preparations, so we should be able to find it almost instantly, Gaia said as she pulled out an orb. Realizing that it was a sealed orb that contained some of Shiro's destruction aura when she was frozen by Beelzebub, Nyx raised an eyebrow and stayed silent while Gaia started to release the seal on the orb. The moment a slither of destruction energy escaped the orb, the entire realm started to have a reaction. The surrounding space started to twist and rip while their position was locked into place. Don't fight it. Allow the spatial current to take you to her old domain, Gaia instructed as she continued to release the destruction aura from the orb. Little by little, a figure started to appear before them. With long white hair and a mist-like body, a pair of red eyes glared towards the 5. Without opening her mouth, the figure raised her hand and snapped her finger. Before the primal gods could even react, they realized that they were now in the middle of a strange garden. All of the plants and buildings here have long been destroyed, and there was no signs of life. Suddenly, a pillar of light erupted from the center of the garden as they looked at one another and nodded their heads. With Tartarus acting as vanguard, Gaia as support, Nyx as mage, Kronos as control mage, and Arenas as all-around support, the 5 made their way towards the center with their guards up. As they approached the center, they stepped onto a bridge and saw an old building with a single person standing beside the table. She was looking at herself in the lake before turning to them. Realizing that it looked similar to the avatar that teleported them here, the 5 could only swallow their saliva nervously as they were potentially dealing with a being that had the powers of a firstborn, something they couldn't compare to at this stage in time. Suddenly, a quest appeared before them. Defeat the Shard of Destruction to pass the test. Looking at the quest, the 5 gritted their teeth and nodded at one another. Don't hold back, Nyx said as the other 4 agreed. Activating his war armor, Tartarus rushed forward as Gaia activated her support buffs onto him. Summoning a great sword, he cleaved up towards the figure while Kronos appeared behind him. Drawing a runic diagram instantly, he froze the figure in time so that they couldn't dodge. However, just as he did this, the figure gathered mana into her fingertips and sliced apart his spell, causing it to fail while also jumping out of Tartarus' attack range. Furrowing his brows, demonic energy gathered in his arms as Tartarus launched a wave of energy from his sword while aiming his palm towards the figure. A cluster of chains erupted out from his hand as it tried to wrap around the figure's body, but a barrier appeared, blocking the chains. The hell? Tartarus muttered in annoyance as he quickly jumped to the side, allowing Nyx to fire her spell. Darkness encroached from the edges of the garden as it swarmed towards the figure in the center. Standing up straight, the figure let out a laugh before slamming her hands together. Bringing them apart, a Tier 9 magic circle could be seen. Get down, Gaia shouted as roots erupted from the garden into a shield. Asterisk, boom. Before it could even form properly, a wave of destructive energy exploded out and erased the roots from existence. Widening her eyes, Gaia watched as the destructive energy surged towards her. Stop spacing out, Arenas shouted out as he jumped in front of her. Stomping down with his foot, the air swirled around him, creating a flow that diverted the destructive energy to their surroundings. Glancing back in shock, Gaia could see that most of the garden that they were just walking past had now been turned to dust. This isn't someone you can just space out and use support spells with. Arenas frowned as Gaia swallowed her saliva and activated a few spells on herself so that she could boost her physical powers. Looking at the figure that now sat on the roof of the building, Gaia could tell that it was smiling while eyeing the 5 of them. ####. Test the challengers. 5 challengers have come to receive a boon from the firstborn of destruction. Test their worthiness. Once they pass a certain threshold, it'll count as a pass. During this test, you will gain access to a small portion of your power. This will only last for this trial. If they pass, you will be allowed to invoke your old privileges to grant them a boost to their divinity rank. Reading this, Shiro furrowed her brows while looking at the 5 misty figures. Should I even help them? It's not like they're related to M-. Before Shiro could even finish her thought, the vanguard dashed towards her with armor wrapping around his body. TCH, not even waiting. So hasty. Shiro frowned as she wanted to activate analysis to increase her perception. However, a system notification appeared in front of her. During this trial, you can only use your old spells. Most of your techniques will be unusable. Available spells: 7 Gates of Destruction, Gate 1, 2, 3, and 4. Raising her eyebrows, Shiro wanted to hop back, but felt the fluctuation of time strands that attempted to pin her down in time, stopping her from doing anything. Wait, are they? Furrowing her brows, Shiro wondered if these 5 are who she thinks they are, but couldn't confirm anything, so she decided to probe them a little for now. Second Gate of Destruction, Invil. Gathering energy into her fingertips, Shiro destroyed the spell that the second figure wanted to cast, and jumped back, narrowly dodging the greatsword strike. The Second Gate of Destruction was a spell she designed in order to get rid of the pesky spells that tried to bind her. A technique developed with the purpose of destroying her prison in mind. While it did not succeed in its original purpose, it turned out to be a rather powerful counter to all spells that she could see. Plus, it had the additional effect of sealing away that spell for the time being. Without giving her a break, Black Chains chased after her. Third Gate of Destruction, Argia. The spell that allowed her to destroy all spells targeting her and absorb it as energy. Blocking the chains, Shiro watched as the caster jumped to the side, while the mage in the back activated her spell. Feeling a familiar fluctuation of mana, a smile slowly crept up on Shiro's face. So it was them. If the reward is for them to reach rank 4 divinity, then I suppose I should make sure I push them to the limit. Shiro grinned as she recognized Nyx's spell Anywhere. After all, she was most familiar with Nyx. Fourth Gate of Destruction, Sealies. An AoE that absorbs energy to become stronger. The stronger the defense, the stronger the spell. As Anima, she had created this after studying the toughness of the prison that prevented her divinity from leaking out. The result was Sealies. I've toned it down slightly. Depending on how they react, I'll have to adjust myself accordingly. Shiro thought to herself as she now had access to a portion of her old power. Even though it's just a portion, if she was serious, she can still kill a rank 3 god with a snap of her finger. Of course, she had no intention of doing that with these 5. Watching Gaia created a barrier while Auranas tried his best to divert the energy of destruction, Shiro sat down with a satisfied grin on her face. Fantastic. Let's push them a little harder so that they can get rank 4. Shiro chuckled while eyeing them up. She had already given plenty of training to Lyrica and the others. It's time for the primals to have their share of training. Seeing that Shiro was taunting them, Tartarus glanced at the rest of the 4 and gestured for them to prepare their spells. Activating a buff, Tartarus threw his greatsword towards Shiro. Creating a dagger from destruction energy, Shiro parried the greatsword to the side. However, just as she parried the weapon, Tartarus teleported besides her and grabbed the sword. Twisting his body, he swung towards her neck. Curling her lips, Shiro attempted to grab the sword, but it vanished before she could lay a finger on the blade. Seeing the blade phase through his hand and slash towards her neck, Shiro immediately bent her body back and stabbed the dagger towards Tartarus' heart. Gritting his teeth, Tartarus continued his attack and changed the direction of his attack so that it cleaved towards her head. Since they know the spells don't work on me, Kronos has decided to focus his spells on Tartarus. He's speeding him up through the time stream so that his actions seem like they're phasing through my guard. Shiro thought to herself as she immediately figured it out with a quick scan of the battlefield. With how fast she could capture information even without the help of Analysis EX, it was easy for Shiro to figure out what was happening. Gaia is activating parts of her domain to increase the regen and defense of her teammates, while Nyx is preparing some support spells since she knows her main attacks will be countered by me. Kronos is trying to help Tartarus increase his chances of hitting me, while Auranas is covering for everyone. He'll divert the destructive energy that I send towards them. However, there is a limit to how much he can divert, and if I use too much of my power, he'll be killed. I want to train them, not kill them. Usually I would beat them to near death, then heal them, but it's very hard for Gaia to heal destruction attacks, so I'll try not to use that for now. Therefore, hand-to-hand combat it is. Shiro thought with a smile. Dropping into a handstand, Shiro grabbed Tartarus' arms with her leg and swung herself behind him before the sword could reach her. Twisting her body, she hit his wrist, forcing him to drop the sword. Sorry about this. Shiro apologized in her mind as she gathered energy into her arms. Slamming down on Tartarus' shoulders, she slammed him through the floor until only his head was showing. Jumping up, Shiro created a dagger and threw it towards Nyx, breaking the spell that she was creating in her hands. *T, cursing out loud in annoyance. Nyx reinforced her body since she could see Shiro charge towards her. Taking a step back, she wanted to make a bit of distance, but Shiro was too fast. Appearing in front of Nyx, Shiro punched towards her stomach only to use that as a feint. Her spare hand chopped towards Nyx's neck, forcing her to flip back and slam against the ground. Grabbing Nyx's leg, Shiro threw her towards Gaia before ducking down to avoid Aurena's attack that was augmented by Chronos' power. Since she had used time magic before, she could feel the ripples instantly and prepare against it. What the hell is wrong with this avatar? Aurena's shouted in frustration. Slamming his hand down, a wave of force exploded out and forced everyone into the air and activated his domain. Third Gate of Destruction, Argia. Releasing an AoE that absorbed all of the energy that Aurena's was funneling into his domain, Shiro controlled her strength before firing the orb below her. Boom. The explosion forced all 5 of the gods away from her, giving her some space to cast spells. However, since she wanted to use hand-to-hand, she used this to split the 5 of them apart to make it easier for her. Stomping down with all her strength, she catapulted herself towards Gaia and grabbed her by the collar. I'll apologize with a mech next time we meet. Shiro chuckled and jumped up into the sky while dragging Gaia behind her. Who the hell do you think you're touching? Gaia shouted out as vines burst out from her palms, forcing Shiro away from her. During the fight, Gaia noticed that Shiro was holding back on using her destruction spells along with reducing their cast times. So she figured that if she was to activate her spell instantaneously in close proximity, it should hit without any problems. Her guess was right as Shiro was locked in vines for a short moment. Her energy was drained from her body as it allowed Gaia to regroup with everyone else. Taking a deep breath, Shiro tore the vines apart and narrowed her eyes. Gathering mana by her feet, she launched herself towards them like a missile. Crack. Before Gaia could finish her sentence, she felt Shiro slam into her ribs at full force, breaking a few of them in the process and catapulting her body through the building in the center of the lake. With Gaia out of commission for a moment, Aurenas charged at Shiro in anger. Using the wind to boost his speed, he appeared before Shiro and slammed his palm against her chest only for it to be blocked by Shiro's arm. Grabbing Aurenas by the wrist, Shiro slammed her spare hand up and broke it before elbowing him in the center of the chest, cracking the bones and forcing him to cough up blood. Suddenly, Chronos appeared from behind Aurenas. Without activating a spell circle, he channeled his divinity and summoned the spells he stored outside of the time stream and forced them back into this world. Seeing that she was surrounded by deadly attacks, Shiro chuckled and activated her first Gate of Destruction. It was the first spell she had created with the intention of breaking her prison. First Gate of Destruction, Varel. Coating her arm with the power of destruction, Shiro grinned maniacally and aimed her attack towards the sky. Bang. Releasing a beam of pure destruction, all of the attacks that Chronos prepared were obliterated. The attacks that managed to avoid this pillar were destroyed regardless due to the connection to spell. Feeling the powers of pure destruction, Shiro couldn't help but laugh at this feeling. A well of joy sprung up from the deepest parts of her heart. The joys of crushing everything in her path, the carnage that she could bring, the blood that she could spell. Everything was null in the face of destruction. Letting out a howl of pure laughter, Shiro was reminded of the time she decorated the labs with the insides of the scientists. A memory of pure ecstasy and happiness. It felt like something in her mind had snapped as Shiro couldn't stop her laughing at all. ####. Looking at the figure that started to break out in laughter, all 5 of the gods felt a chill down their spine. When's the last time you felt this feeling? Gaia asked as she was healing herself to the best of her abilities. When I was about to die, this avatar's lost her mind. Tartarus said as his armor had been fractured by Shiro's attack despite being one of Hephaestus' best works. Yeah, it's like when a beast has lost all care. I don't think she'll be holding back like she did before. Nyx frowned. So you noticed that she had been playing with us. Chronos laughed bitterly. Should we try what we've been practicing for the war? Nyx asked, but she already knew the answer. Well, if we didn't then I doubt we'll get the chance. Gaia said as all 5 of them released their auras, releasing their true forms. All 5 of them could now control their divinities to their maximum potential. As this was a trial, there was no need to ask the system for permission to use this form. All inhibitors were off. Charging forward, Tartarus was like a demon from the deepest parts of hell. His skin was now akin to lava while armor covered his body. A cape of pure red energy fluttered behind him while volcanic rock erupted from the ground, transforming the garden into a second hell. Twisting his body, Tartarus instantly appeared before the figure as Kronos had erased the time it took for him to reach that position. Just as the figure was about to dodge Tartarus' attack, black chains manifested and locked her in place. Since Nyx knew of her destructive powers, more chains continued to appear in order to replace the ones that will break. Asterisk, bang! Shattering the chains apart, a looming black shadow erupted out, pushing Tartarus back as his arm was disintegrated in one go. However, Kronos immediately exerted his divinity, turning back time on Tartarus' wound and restored his arm. However, Kronos did not expect the spell to take so much energy since the damage healed was much greater than what he had predicted. Looking at the shadow, the 5 gods watched as it condensed into the shape of a woman with demonic wings behind her. Cracking open her mouth, the figure spoke a single word, Viral. From her body, thousands of motes split off her shadow before releasing an omnidirectional attack that erased everything it touched. As the dust settled, Shiro could see a single figure standing in front of the other 4. Panting heavily, Gaia barely managed to keep the others safe by exerting her divinity to the maximum, creating a shield around them that automatically revived them if they died. The thing with her domain is that when activated, it could revive a whole army and had a long cooldown. Be careful, that one attack used up all the revives I had. My domain won't appear for a while, Gaia said as she collapsed onto her knees. Even with the power of her domain, there was still a wound on her leg. Quickly running to her side, Kronos healed her while keeping an eye on the figure who seemed to be looking for a way out again. Walking away from the 5, it started to make its way towards the edge. Looking at the border of her prison, Shiro wanted to leave so that she could rain destruction upon the world that turned its back against her. Kill the ones who killed her and enjoy the fine wine called revenge. However, as the dark feeling was covering her heart, Shiro saw a figure in front of her with a small smile. She had black hair and dark eyes and the same clothes that she wore. The person smiled and shook her head. Seeing this, something clicked within Shiro's mind as the fury within her heart faded, and she knew she had lost herself in the destructive nature of using her old spells. Just as she calmed down, she was torn from the avatar and teleported into a strange space. Trying to activate her spells, she found that she was unable to, and all the spells on her status screen had been grayed out for now. The figure that appeared before her was also missing, but she had more important concerns for now. Furrowing her brows, she glanced down. This is wrong. What the hell? Shiro muttered with a frown. Without her controlling the avatar was now radiating an enormous amount of destruction aura. Besides her, 2 figures appeared. One who seemed to be crazy with killing intent in her eyes and the desire to destroy everything in sight, and one who's silent but full of anger. Her eyes burned with fury and hatred. This is not wrong. This is what things should be. The second woman said as she looked at Shiro. Why are you so intent on running from your identity? You've even gone as far as to keep yourself fragmented so that your divinity does not recover. Why must you chase such an impossible goal? You cannot and will not obtain creation. The laws of the universe forbids it. You have already tried in the past, and the result was your own destruction. Why must you tread the same path again? She asked as Shiro glanced towards her. Because if I don't, then I'll never forgive myself. I cannot let my powers run rampant in this world, or else everything I love will be turned to ash. That cannot happen. I will not let it happen. Therefore, I chase the possibility of creation. Shiro smiled. Plus, it's not as impossible as you might imagine. I've already made some decent progress towards the goal. Hearing this, the woman shook her head and sighed. You'll see your foolish ways soon enough. The avatar used for this test has now lost control, and it will attempt to break this prison. While the prison is damaged, it still retains some of its powers, so it should be restrained for the time being. As for those 5, I doubt they can fight an avatar without you holding it back. Well, I wouldn't know about that. I think they'll do just fine. Plus, I have a little gift for them. Shiro grinned as she clasped her hands together. Dark energy gathered around her hand as she closed her eyes. Iriel, Shiro called out as her necklace broke off and transformed into Iriel. Shocked that Shiro could call upon a weapon in this state, the woman watched as she grabbed the blade and launched it towards the five gods. Activating Iriel's third effect, Shiro grinned as reality distorted to allow Iriel to arrive by Gaia's side. Third effect, a strike that distorts reality. Iriel is bound to my code, and while I don't know what state I'm in with my skills sealed, Iriel is a special exception. It's the first chaos-ranked weapon after all. Shiro laughed. #####. Watching the avatar tread towards the border, Nyx slammed her hand down as a tsunami of darkness rushed towards it. Cover for Gaia and don't let it escape this place. If the gods lock onto its aura, they might make a connection between the firstborn of destruction and Shiro. Nyx shouted out. I already know that. Raising his hand, Kronos activated a Tier 8 magic circle and froze time around the avatar. Letting out a cry of laughter, the avatar activated the third gate of destruction. A pulse of energy exploded out around her, shattering all the spells targeting the avatar and funneled the energy into it, empowering the avatar more. Aiming its hand towards them, it activated the first gate as destruction energy gathered towards its palm. However, before it could fire the attack, the space above it tore apart. Bang! A single blade slammed down from the skies, shredding the arm, and landed beside Gaia. Shocked at the appearance of the blade, this was the first time they saw damage on the avatar. Iriel, Soul Blade of the Destroyer, Chaos. A blade formed from the masterpiece of Hephaestus, an indestructible sword and an immortal soul of an ancient being. Tempered by the primal forces of destruction, this blade now possesses the power to render all to null. Wielded by the firstborn of destruction, this is the only blade in the world that can handle her power. Seeing the description of this blade, Gaia knew that Shiro had sent it to them. Only question is how. Shaking her head, Gaia reached out and grabbed the sword. This was no time to ask how. It was time to act, and she needed to borrow this sword's power to cut down the avatar. Feeling a burst of energy flow into her body, Gaia's body started to recover as she heard a voice in her head. Get the others to support you. You're the only one who can wield me somewhat due to your divinity. If the others hold me, they'll start getting injured by me instead. Don't worry about activating skills. I'll handle that as long as you can make sure you land some hits on the avatar. Hearing this voice, Gaia recognized it to be the voice of the ancient terror and knew that Shiro must have combined him with Sylvanes to create Iriel. Understood. Gaia nodded as she activated some buffs on herself. Support me. Shiro sent this blade over to help, but only I can use it right now due to my divinity. Nyx, cover my back and teleport me to suitable locations. Gaia shouted out as the other four gods nodded their heads. Stomping down, Gaia launched herself towards the avatar as Aurena's boosted her speed. Kronos applied a rune to her back that allowed her to flow through the time stream faster, making it seem like she was teleporting through space, while another rune appeared on the avatar that slowed it down. Swinging its arms towards Gaia, the avatar activated the first gate of destruction on the side in an attempt to destroy the thing that cut off its arm. Swing me. Iriel shouted out as Gaia nodded her head, twisting her body. She felt the energy drain from her body as the runes lit up on the blade's surface. Iriel passive effect. You can cut down all forms of magic and divine spells, converting the energy used for yourself in order to replenish mana or divine energy. Kish. Colliding with Veril, Iriel tore the spell apart and absorbed the energy into itself. As the only blade in the world that can handle Shiro's destructive energy, it would be ridiculous for it to fail in front of an avatar. Using the energy he absorbed from the first gate of destruction, Iriel activated his fourth effect. You can infuse any element or divinity with this blade, and the effectiveness will be boosted by 300% and ignores all resistance towards the element or divinity. Cannot boost divinity on the level of firstborn. Absorbing a part of Gaia's divinity and energy, he fused the two within his body, causing a sickly green energy to radiate from his blade. Seeing this, Gaia gestured towards Nyx, who teleported her behind the avatar. However, the avatar was prepared and tried to attack Gaia, but Tartarus was faster. I'll need Hephaestus to give me a new sword when I head back, he shouted out as he slammed the great sword into the body of the avatar, forcing it back while allowing the destructive energy to eat away at his sword, but it was worth it. With the obstacles now out of her way, Gaia swung the blade without knowing what its effect had done to her stats. Gaia LVL 1000 High Primordial Goddess of Life. Divinity rank 4.